hoping that I've given them a direction in Judaism and a direction of their connection to Israel and their connection to their peers and their love of being a Jew more than they had in ninth grade. When you get them in college, so the advantage of college is that they get to make a lot more of their independent decisions.
Yeah.
Right? They could decide to go to Israel on a whim.
The following is a conversation with Rabbi Yitz Levi. Yitz was born in Paramus, New Jersey, and for over 13 years served in senior roles, including as the director of Greater Philadelphia and the director of regional projects for NCSY, the National Congregation of Synagogue Youth. He also used to lead youth trips to Israel in the summer, and has recently moved on to a new path working in real estate construction and development. Here's his story. Rabbi Levi, it's a sight for sore eyes. Haven't seen you in a while, my man. How's life treating you?
Life is treating me well. It has been quite a while. I'm trying to think how long it's been, actually. I was trying to go back in time. When did you
I think
graduate?
something
That's
like
really the question.
I graduated 2017, but I think we hung out at Judah in in
That's
kind of
true.
later that year. So I think it's been, what is it, 2023, almost 6 years since we've seen each other in person or virtually
In
like
real,
this.
yeah, definitely hanging out for sure.
Yeah, but really excited
Been
and
too
happy
long.
that you took a chance to be the guest on the podcast. We're gonna have a great conversation and a great time, and it's always great catching up with an old friend, or mostly friend. We'll get into those shenanigans a little bit
Friend,
later
mentor,
too.
rabbi, you
Uh,
can call me whatever you want.
yeah, there should be an answer. There should be like an answer E for like all the options above. It's like for all of the above, and there's
I'll take
you
that.
can't just list 5 options because there's a zillion there. But that's a whole podcast episode in itself. But essentially, for those that don't know Rabbi Levi, and I'm assuming a lot of people are probably going to watch this, that are a lot of my peers and a lot of us that went to NCSY or grew up going to the weekend getaways and Shabbatones. But for those that don't know Rabbi Levi, he's been a voice in the Jewish youth at NCSY for many years now. Recently, he left to kind of
Yeah.
pursue something else, but he's done a great job growing kind of young Jewish youth in the Philadelphia area, and a lot of really fun stuff to get into. And he's also got a really exciting journey. But Rabbi, just to start out with, I forgot if I asked you this before in person, but where'd you end up growing up?
I grew up in Paramus, New Jersey. It's right over like the George Washington Bridge, Teaneck, Englewood. I grew up in Paramus, spent a lot of time in like Manhattan for school.
Got it. So Paramus is North Jersey, right?
North Jersey, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Bergen County.
Did you go to religious school in Manhattan, or kind of
I,
just modern
I did.
Orthodox?
I went to a religious school. I'm actually German descent, called Yekish.
Interesting.
If you look it
Wow.
up, it means short coat, actually, what
Mhm.
Yekish means. But there was a school that my parents went there. My father went there when he was younger, my older siblings. That's actually where I was born. I was born in Washington Heights, and then we
Mhm.
moved to Paramus when I was 1.
Got it. Washington Heights is just kind of north of Manhattan, really probably close to the Bronx area. So really interesting to hear about that. Was the Jewish school you went to, was it an overnight school or is it just a day school? I know there's a bit of a different vibe depending on the yeshiva that you go to.
So elementary, middle school, was definitely, I commuted. It was about a 45-minute drive, on a school bus every day. And then when we got to high school, for ninth and 10th grade, I was commuting, and then 11th and 12th grade they actually opened up a dorm, and I dormed with about 15 other guys for
How
11th and 12th grade.
how is it living in a dorm or going to overnight school at yeshiva?
It's great. There's obviously, especially when you're used to commuting every day, it's nice to not have to commute every day.
Mhm.
You walk like 5 minutes and you're back in your wherever you're sleeping or staying and eating dinner and stuff. And also you get to, because it was a religious school, so there was learning, later in the evening that I used to miss because I would go home, and this gave me an opportunity to partake in that. So it was all around, enjoyable.
So an interesting vibe, actually. I know these days there's a lot more, or I'm trying to think of the best way to frame this, but essentially the Jewish community is under much more of a magnifying glass in the sense that everything is publicized about us. And, unfortunately, with kind of current events, and there's been a lot of stuff in pop culture and just kind of in film and media about us in general that's only come to fruition in recent years. But not to age you, but back when you were in yeshiva or you were in high school, I'm assuming there wasn't as much of kind of a national media attention or magnifying glass. So back then, when there wasn't as much focus, or you guys weren't getting as much, I'll just call it attention, whether positive or negative. What was it like growing up religious?
Yeah, so we definitely did not have a lot of attention because, just the internet. I remember being like in the chat room. Like I think that was the extent of the internet. Like I did not have an email address until I think I was married.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
I don't know if I'm aging myself.
Do those back then, to follow up, do email addresses come with marriage in the Jewish community, or you can have one beforehand?
No, I didn't have anybody that I was emailing. Like I
Got
didn't have
it.
a like I was in yeshiva after high school and I didn't have a job. So like who was I emailing? Like there was
Lovely.
no need to communicate. I got my first cell phone also post high school. So
Hmm.
yeah, same
Got it.
idea.
Interesting.
Um, but growing up, I could tell you it was definitely simpler.
Hmm.
And as a parent, I'm raising my kids in this generation, and I'm seeing a lot of things that I didn't have to go through. And my wife and I talk about it all the time. Is that would we want to have big kids in this generation? And Jewish religious kids for sure. And the answer is it's difficult. The exposure that we have to other things besides things that they have exposure to us, but we're hearing everything that happens. Take the war that's going on in Israel. Like growing up, we didn't know. Like I lived in the Gulf through the Gulf War.
Hmm.
We couldn't tell you casualty numbers by the minute. We couldn't tell you what happened, and if something happened, God forbid, like we found out about the war starting. It was actually the holiday of Simchat Torah at that
Hmm.
time, and we found out about it like through like people who were walking through and said, oh, we're praying for you, and we're like, what are you praying for?
Hmm.
Like, and that's the exposure that we live in now. Growing up back then, it was a lot simpler because you did what you did, and there was less judgment for what you did.
Hmm.
There was less exposure for what you did, so you were able to do it in comfort. Now sometimes we're nervous. There are people that don't want to go to synagogue because if I go to synagogue, then people are going to see me.
Hmm.
I don't want to do this public display of something because
Hmm.
people are going to take pictures. They're going to post it on Instagram. They'll do
And
marches and things like that. It mushrooms so quickly. Even what we're doing right now, like the fact that we could do this,
mhm,
this is exposure. Thank God it's a positive exposure,
of course,
but
we'll
it's
do our best
exposure
to keep it
that we
positive.
never
So,
had.
yep, I was going to
We'll
say
find out. We'll find out from the thumbs up and thumbs down after we after we finish.
no, we're gonna only positive exposure here. I may not be as religious, but I'm a proud Zionist, and even though I don't look like it, a proud Israeli citizen. So, interesting note on that. A quick follow up on there. Do you think that? Well, actually, you answered that, but is it harder, or kind of what challenges do you see with raising kids in this generation versus kind of what you had to go through growing up at a time when there was less of a magnifying glass?
So it's a little bit of the magnifying glass, but I think it's a little bit to do with what we had. Like when our parents were home, they were home.
Hmm.
Maybe the home phone rang, if you guys know what a home phone is.
Yep.
It's the thing that's attached to the wall in your house, if you have
Hmm.
one. Most people don't even have a home phone at this point. They have only cell phones. So when parents were home, they were home. Um, when we went somewhere, we had full attention. Now, when I'll own my mistakes as a parent sometimes. Like we'll go somewhere and then a work call will call. I'm supposed to be off, but like this was an emergency and only I could answer the question. I'm
Hmm.
taking that phone call. So just exposure in that sense, just the ability to separate and close up. We have a rule at we try our best to like make sure to put our phones away during the dinner table. You know,
Hmm.
that way at least like when we're sitting with our kids, thank God I merit being able to sit with my kids and eat dinner most nights. It's a different vibe when my phone is away than when my phone is around. And sometimes people will call and I'll call them back, and you know what? They'll survive.
Hmm.
Um, and that's one piece. And then the exposure to the internet and what you can access in the internet. Um, it's the curse of affluence
Yep.
that I think the world suffers from. But as a religious Jew, we have to struggle with the balance of getting our kids what they need and what they want, and sometimes the need is not actually what they really need, but really what they need socially. And there's a lot of peer pressure, and again, because of the magnifying glass of what it is, we need to portray ourselves in certain visions, based on the way the world looks at us,
Hmm.
and says, I need to get this and I need to do that. And our kids will sometimes pressure us in that direction, but everybody's doing that. And all my friends are going here. And it makes it definitely infinitely more complicated. I think we get more reward because
For
we're
sure.
working harder. but there's definitely a lot of struggles and a lot of things that, make it complicated.
For sure. Well, the harder you work, the better you feel. So as a silver lining there. But overall,
That's for sure.
would you agree that because there's just, for better or for worse, this democratization of information, it makes it much harder kind of to raise a child within kind of more religious values in this society?
Yeah. I mean, you walk down the street and you see things that you used to have to, be slinky on a corner or sidewalk, and
Hmm.
buy something on a stand. Now you just walk through Manhattan and you've been exposed to it all.
Hmm.
Like I don't, I'm not going to say it online,
Yep.
um, but like we know what we see, and
Yep.
it's not even people trying to be one way or the other. Growing up, you didn't see it.
Hmm.
You didn't see it. The billboards were different, advertisements were different. Even the media that we see and the commercials that we get and the ads that pop up on our phones, you know, what you could send to somebody is like that. You send something that maybe you regret, but that's it. It's done. It's sent. You can't undo it.
You know what's crazy that you brought that up? It reminds me of a point. It's the fact that I think maybe religious people, whether it's Jews or whoever, and I'll just take by what's written because that's as far as I know. I'm also no expert here, so sorry, I don't want to offend anyone here. But maybe someone could make the argument that everything that was written is kind of the hardcore truth. But whenever you see something posted on social media or wherever, a thought comes to mind. It's how do you know that's true? Because everything you're reading is a narrative. I mean, one of the main reasons I started this podcast, and I'm no perfect individual, but I like to get down to the bottom of things. Whether whatever someone's life story is, what someone's perspective is, really have them just be able to talk. And I'm doing my best not to have an agenda and more an agenda of curiosity. But I definitely think that in modern times, there's a lot more emphasis on the narrative as opposed to the truth. And you see it a lot in the news these days when there was, for example, in the war, when there was a big hospital that blew up in Gaza,
Right.
all the news outlets rushed to blame Israel. I mean, it was they had their finger on the button, and then a recording, the IDF published basically were the terrorists that were, in short, they were like, oh no, that was probably our missile, and then all the media outlets they didn't even change. They were just like, oh, a hospital exploded. It's still under investigation. Yet,
Right.
this is out, and that's not even openly. I'm from Israel, so I'm obviously we're all biased to an extent here. But when there's someone literally comes out and there's like a report saying that or you see the terrorists saying that this was us, and so national media outlets are like, oh, it's under investigation. It really makes you think about how much of things are true and how much people kind of chase a narrative as opposed to the truth.
Million percent. I mean, I can make it more mundane and less political, but like you just look at sports.
For
You
sure.
ever read an article for the opposing team? They think
No.
our team is the worst and we think their team is the worst and our team is going to win it. And you read it and you're like, I believe it. And then like the opposite happens and you're like, but I believed it.
Hmm.
I mean, the fact that Wikipedia exists, I think is hilarious. It's like, whatever, you want to just edit it? Go for it. I mean, we'll put your name on it, but
Hmm.
you can edit it. War of 1812 did not happen. It just didn't. I don't know. We'll take it out of the history books because
We're,
we
we're
want to.
War of 1812, you could say, happened in 1814, and no one,
Right.
maybe
Well, it
half the
did. My
population would
son
believe it.
actually literally just told me that that's why that war is in my head. It went from 1812 to 1815. So it's really
Interesting.
the War of 1812 through 15, but it's less catchy name.
Got it. So someone on Wikipedia should make that correction if they're listening. But no,
100%.
really, really crazy point on there. I think on the note about sports, I think it's interesting how we're pretty much exposed to our local media, and it's funny because it's all the same news stations, but they all have branches with across the state. So whatever branch it is for that team, and we grew up thinking our team is so good, so good, so good. For example, after an Eagles game, you search up Eagles on Google, you see Eagles Twitter, but then you search up, you say Cowboys Twitter or Chiefs Twitter, and then they're like, oh, we beat them so badly, this that. So it's really interesting to see these narratives. I mean, I think in summary, hopefully one day I'm doing my best to have it on this podcast, but one day we can focus more on the truth and facts. And, I don't think it's possible to get to completely the truth because I think we're all biased towards our experience for better or worse, regardless of our
And we
religious
don't
views
believe
or
in
not.
and we don't believe in censorship.
That too. Yeah. That's for
I think
sure.
I think that's the biggest issue is that if we could censor, which I don't believe that we should, but if we
Mhm.
could censor, then we would be able to stop, misinformation. But in the end, usually if we would censor, that would probably prove that our information is the misinformation. So
Yeah.
it's very hard.
If there could be some purely objective AI out there that's somehow, some way censored for this. So if there are any billionaires like Elon Musk who are listening, work on that project and we can catch up. But really cool conversation around that. Back to regarding your story. You grew up in a more religious environment in a simpler time, and you ended up pursuing this really senior role in NCSY and really achieving a lot there. But early on, did you know you wanted to pursue a kind of role in this kind of organization, or you thought about different opportunities growing up?
It's a great question because
Thank you.
recently I actually like thought about it, like a little bit going back in time. Every once in a while, I'm asked this question. Growing up, I grew up in a house that we constantly had people over.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that in my brain, I computed that as normal.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like we were doing something different than anybody else. And I think, therefore, it didn't resonate with me actually when I went into a profession that pushed me in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a lot later. It was probably like 5-10 years into NCSY that somebody asked me that question. I'm like, you know what? Like my parents did a lot of this. Like
Mm-hmm.
they didn't do it like professionally, but we have people that we could say grew up on our home. They spend every Shabbat at our home. They were part of our family. And I think like looking back, it definitely played a role in me becoming who I am.
Mm-hmm.
But in regard to the profession, I was probably going to be a social worker. That
Really
was
interesting.
that was probably the direction my brain was going in. Um, I'll brag for a second. I'm very good at reading people. I'm very good at
As a side
understanding
note,
people.
as I and many of my friends who are listening can tell, but that's another conversation. Just had to shamelessly plug that. But you were saying,
But if you look at what I did, it was the way I looked at it was religious social work.
mm-hmm.
It was listening to people. It was problem solving with people. It was helping people grapple with different things in their lives, be it family, be it school, be it social. So instead of directing it in the line of, psychology and understanding that piece through that lens, it went through the Torah lens and the way we understood everything through the Bible. Like, that was how I found the direction that I was going in. And when I was leaving, I was actually thinking about potentially going back to school
Mm-hmm.
for social work.
Interesting.
But this the next stage of my journey. I don't know if you want to ask questions about that. We could talk about it in a few minutes if before we jump
We'll
to the
get there.
next stage.
Yep.
But it was definitely social work was probably the one direction I was really going in.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I do anything, my wife says, "Oh, you'd make a good doctor," because I'm like, my kids are splurting blood after they get cut, or "Oh, you just argued great. You'd make a great lawyer." So either I'm really good at everything, or I'm decent at most things. But still, the direction I would have gone would probably have been social work.
Interesting. Well, a lot of Jews, shameless plug, and I mean this in a friendly way, would make great lawyers because we love arguing. I think it's a bit
Oh,
of it in
100%.
our DNA. But you're a smart person. You never considered doing something more in like financy, or you were always 100% geared towards kind of helping others in a more social way.
I think, from my upbringing and going back to it, I think that definitely peppered it. When I got married, I lived in Israel for 4 years, and my two oldest were born there.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent a lot of time in it's called a Kiruv Kollel. It was a school, like I guess a prep school for post marriage,
Mm-hmm.
that prepped for doing the work that I did in NCSY. And they were helping people get into all different organizations like Maor and trying to think other
Like
other
Mayor,
Kiruv,
Chabad, all of those.
Chabad, right? All those different organizations. So that was the direction we were going in. But while we were there, and again, sort of like an unbeknownst to us that this helped shape us, we spent a lot of time. I have a sister that lives there and a brother-in-law. And I would say probably for the first year, we probably lived there. We had our own apartment, but we spent so much time there. We would go there for dinner all the time. We would go there for Shabbat all the time. and we lived within like a 15-minute walk. So even if we didn't sleep there, we would spend a lot of time there.
Mhm.
And they had a home like that also. Like my brother-in-law worked in a yeshiva for a long time for boys that struggled with drug addiction, and alcohol addiction.
Mhm.
And these boys were in his house all the time when we were there, and we got exposed to watching them help them,
Mhm.
and it inspired us to pursue a direction. And when I say us, I mean me and my wife. We are a team in that.
Mhm.
Anybody that says that when you do a profession like NCSY or anything like that, that it's just the husband or just the one that's working, it's false.
Mhm.
It's a very family. It's not just me and my wife. Well, that was when we made a decision, but my kids we're all 100% involved. I made sure, no matter, this is just a good tidbit of advice. If you ever go into something like this, that you have a lot of people in your home,
Mhm.
that no matter who came to my house, my kids always sat next to us.
Mhm.
Yeah, like it's so important because it shows your children that still they're the most important people in your lives, and they should be.
Mhm.
But I want to help everybody else as well. So you give up your time a lot for them, but when it comes to like our Shabbat meal and we're all together and we're deciding where to sit, my kids are going to sit next to me.
That's
Um,
a beautiful note there. I think, what's interesting about that is whenever you go on this big NCSY event or Shabbaton, there's a reason why it's the whole family's there. And by the way, your wife is an awesome person. I know I'm saying that on air, but definitely send her my regards and wish her the best and
she's
continuing with.
just as much fun to interview, by the way. She'd be great.
We
If
should,
you're
yeah,
looking for somebody else.
we'll get her on another episode. We'll have this as the preview for that little cut line. But no, it's really interesting to hear, and I love that you said it was more of kind of a family oriented vibe, and you always liked having people over. Candidly, one of my really good friends, who I'm not going to mention, but you may have an idea who I'm talking about. When I used to live in New York, he would always have a bunch of people over and very family oriented vibes, and he's an interesting character. I don't want to, I don't know if I have his permission to say his name, but
It's all good.
we all really appreciate kind of having that. And the reason I brought that up is because it just reminds me of your story and how you always had a lot of people over and he always has a lot of people over. And in the sense that the big emphasis is on like community, being around each other, being around, fellow people, fellow Jews, and really just kind of having a great time. So,
100%.
interesting to see kind of what, kind of where he'll go. And, since you guys have similar upbringings, I don't know if my friend's going to be a rabbi, but cool to see that you guys have that similar vibe. But really great and something I definitely commend. On a note that you mentioned before, you said that you went to kind of this Kira Yeshiva where they prep people for a lot of these Jewish organizations. As you mentioned, there are a ton of other Jewish organizations out there. I mean, you happen to go down the route of NCSY, but there's also Chabad, Meor, Olami, Aish. I'm sure plenty of others that I haven't heard yet or others that will come up. Is there a reason you chose NCSY in particular as opposed to the other ones?
Yes, a great question again. I love your questions.
Thank you. I
Some of them
appreciate it.
some I saw in advance, but some I didn't.
It's okay,
I didn't want to
Rabbi.
be
I
too
have to.
I didn't want to be too prepped for these
It's okay
questions.
to tell you quick in advance. We'll get to the question in a second, but you don't build the best business podcast in the world by asking boring questions. So we make sure
Right,
to
but
have
I
great
want to
questions here.
plug. I want to plug that you actually have great questions.
Thank you. I
That's
appreciate
my
it.
plug. But what I found amazing about NCSY, and I met you actually pre-high school,
Yep.
and that is, I think, something that you're one of the few that got like a preview into our world
The
of
shenanigans.
NCSY before we act right, the shenanigans for sure. Sushi night, right?
Yep.
Hanukkah sushi.
Sushi, Starbucks. Yeah, that's all I needed. And I
Yeah.
was there.
Your brother just claimed, "Oh, there was no babysitter. I need to bring him."
Yeah.
I still remember the first time we met. Do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, we'll save that for another episode. For another episode.
um, but what I found interesting about NCSY was that it gave um, I mean, should I talk a little bit about what NCSY does? Because I don't know if like
I mean, no,
I'm
you could
talking.
no. Feel free, no. Feel free to talk about
Yeah,
NCSY to give
I
to
just
give a
yeah.
broad. Sure, I'll just add really quickly to give a broad background. I mean, all these organizations are great, and I wouldn't call one better or worse than the other. I just think they all have a different vibe, and you go towards the one where kind of your vibe or your values are more aligned with that one. So,
Right.
kind of that being said, feel free to say whatever you
So
wanted.
I don't think it was necessarily about the vibe itself. I think it was about the work that we did.
Mm-hmm.
NCSY dealt with high school kids.
Got it.
So what I found was that it dealt with high school kids who were really in their formative years. Like if you look at anybody in high school, we've all had friends in ninth grade, and then when they graduate in 12th grade, you're like, whoa, not the same person,
For
either
sure.
for better or for worse. We won't talk about anybody in particular.
Mhm.
But that's your formative years. That's where you're going through puberty. That's where you're finding out who you are. You're making decisions, what group of people you're going to be a part of, what direction you want your life to go in, where you're going to go to college, what you're going to do. All those things are in high school. Maybe a little bit before, maybe a little bit after, but those 4 years are so important into the shaping of a human being that when I felt that I met somebody in ninth grade and then let go of them, sometimes more than others, we're still here, so
Yep.
we obviously keep up. In 12th grade, I'm hoping that I've given them a direction in Judaism and a direction of their connection to Israel and their connection to their peers and their love of being a Jew more than they had in ninth grade. When you get them in college, so the advantage of college is that they get to make a lot more of their independent decisions.
Yep.
Right? They could decide to go to Israel on a whim. They could decide to, change their lifestyle, which high school kids are not necessarily able to do. But my goal is to prep the seeds and plant the seeds so that when they do get to college and they get to campus, they're pro-Israel, they're pro-Judaism. They're not self-hating. That they're prepared to stand up to what might go on a campus, as we've seen very clearly is going on campuses around the world. And that was the goal, to make sure that I gave as much as I can. So I felt like I was making a huge difference in these kids' lives, to be able to, and teens, not really kids, in order to give them the opportunity so that when they get into life, when they make their decisions, they're making decisions in a real way with real knowledge. And that when they get to somebody that stands against what they're standing for, they're like, no, I have a strong foundation. I know what I stand for. You can't tell me that because you're also a Jew and you loathe Israel, that's why I should follow you, because I've heard all the amazing things that Israel's done. And how many unfortunate souls have gotten to college and just don't have that knowledge, and they don't have that forethought, and they get swallowed up into that. So that was the main reason why I chose NCSY. I love the age group because it gave me an opportunity to really, I think, really, change lives.
So the biggest thing you would say is that, while all the other organizations are really great and have their programs, in NCSY, you saw the biggest potential to kind of help kids or educate kids within those really formative years. I mean, 14 to 18, it's just your prime teenage years. Everyone's trying to figure it out. And you thought it could be a great way to kind of set a great Jewish foundation so these people are prepared to make decisions, whether it's in college or kind of after college as well.
Correct.
I think, no, beautiful point, and definitely were formative in my life. I know we've had a lot of fun memories, but I do
So
agree in the
many.
sense that I think NCSY does a great job of trying to kind of bring a lot of Jews together and really positively influence them for the time that's going to come. I think what we see now happening on campuses, and we'll get into a lot of those kind of issues a little bit later in the discussion, but a lot of times you might see even Jews who aren't as educated or didn't have that kind of opportunity getting swallowed up into this vacuum of anti-Semitism. And it's really sad to, I'm not going to speak French here, but it's really sad to see. And, I hope that one day people can be a little more educated and, people will be a little nicer. So I think it's really beautiful that you kind of got a chance to pursue that. On another quick note, so you did mention that you and your wife lived in Israel for a few years, and I forgot if I asked you this before, but how did you and your wife end up meeting?
So funny, we were actually related through marriage 4
Really?
times before we got married.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
By the way,
Do you want to hear them all?
well, we can hear them all, but to clarify, like in-law related, not
Yeah, yes. We were
in-law.
no, I'm not. Yeah, no, 100%. That's why I said related
Baruch
through
Hashem,
marriage. That's why
yeah,
I said that. I said through marriage.
Baruch
Through
Hashem,
marriage.
six healthy
Yeah.
kids. We just have to put that out there to make sure. Just have to emphasize.
So the first one is my first cousin and her first cousin are
Mhm.
married to each other. They actually set us up.
Wow.
So that's the answer to your question. That's how we met.
Mhm.
Um, my mother's first cousin and my mother-in-law's first cousin are married to each other.
Interesting.
My uncle and her uncle married sisters,
Wow.
and my first cousin and her first cousin married sisters.
Hmm.
And that's like my father to her father, my mother to her mother, my mother to her father. Like it's all like it's everything. It's not like it's just one part of the family. It's not like my father and her father, interacted, but like it hits like all different angles. It was very cool. When we got engaged, everybody was like, we're related again. Like we knew everybody.
Hmm.
Like I spent time in her aunt's house many times because
Hmm.
she was my first cousin once removed's grandmother.
Hmm.
So,
Interesting.
like not related to me, but related to my cousins.
Yeah.
So that we met through that. They set us up. Um, and like I said, the families knew each other pretty
Mhm.
well, in a lot of ways. So it wasn't like such a far fetch.
How
I
long
should
did you
scare you
guys?
and tell you how long we date.
I was no. So you
And
know what's funny about that? That's how you know we're having a deep discussion because that was literally my follow up question. How long did you guys date
a lot of
before
questions.
getting
We
engaged?
we dated for a month. We got engaged on the seventh date.
Wow, that's beautiful. I don't know if I ask a girl
If
out
this
by the
was like a live
either.
podcast, I feel like the questions would be coming in, you
Yeah,
know?
no, for sure. I don't know if I even ask a girl out by the seventh date, let alone marry. But I think I mean, it's beautiful. You have a beautiful family, and we'll get into all that. But on a quick follow up to there, you guys are typically in the more religious community move at a much faster rate than kind of traditional dating. So
Mhm.
overall, how would you say that more orthodox or kind of traditional Jewish dating differs from more modern dating?
So I think the fundamental difference is that generally secular dating is I don't know you at all,
Hmm.
but I like you, or more importantly, I like the way you look.
It's fair.
Um, Want to get a cup of coffee.
Hmm.
We might have nothing in common, but we're going to go out
Hmm.
because maybe we have something in common and I like the way you look.
Hmm.
Right? We're not gonna pick up a girl in the bar that we think is not, something that we're attracted to. We're just
Hmm.
not. So that's secular dating. Um, Religious dating, Orthodox religious dating, and the spectrum really moves,
It's fluid for sure.
from websites like Saw You at Sinai, which is not it's a matchmaking site. So it's not like I'm going to a bar, I see your profile, I see a little bit about you. The way we were set up, you know, so that's the traditional, more religious Orthodox view is that somebody sets you up, which what that automatically does is, first of all, there's something called a resume.
Hmm.
Like we actually have a resume about who we are, where we went to school, who our siblings are, who our rabbis or mentors are, people that can vouch for our authenticity of who we are. If you want to find out about my personality, or, do I get angry fast? Do I like to have people over in my house all the time? Right? Those type of questions. That's traditionally on a resume, or at least numbers for people who you can call to find out about that. And what that does is that cuts out a lot of the preamble.
Hmm.
So we dated 7 dates, but we probably cut out 15 of them
Hmm. Interesting.
because we skipped the initial I see you at the bar, or at the coffee shop, and I ask you for to go out for a cup of coffee or buy you a drink.
Hmm.
So that's date one, right? And then, maybe we meet up for coffee a couple times and just hang out, and that's dates 2 to 5, and then, other things might happen. And then we go to date 6, and it, the whole beginning is like, do I even want to hang out with you?
Hmm.
And for us, that's the only piece is we know that we fit, like, goals in life for the most part. We know that our families are compatible. We know, potentially where we want to live. A lot of those questions are answered before you even go out on your first date.
Hmm.
So now it's like, do I like you? Am I attracted to you? So it's actually like almost like secular dating in reverse. We do all the stuff at the end first, and
Okay.
then we find out if we want to hang out with each other, and we go a little bit deeper and find out a little bit more personally about each
Mhm.
other, and what is interesting to ourselves, and if we're compatible in that sense.
That's a beautiful note there. I think a really interesting follow on that I think is can either really go one way or the other. What's really booming right now is a lot of these dating apps, and I know dating apps in the past have gotten a bad rep for kind of being a little more we'll just call it physical oriented, but I think over time there have been apps that have tried to get a little more quote unquote resume like or more compatibility wise. So, in your opinion, do you think dating apps push people more towards secular dating or more toward the traditional way of dating?
It depends on what the app would be. I think you hit the nail on the head with like, if it's a physical, if the picture is the biggest thing on your screen and then underneath it says like a couple little blurbs about you, then we know
Mm-hmm.
which direction you're going in. If it's
Yeah.
like a small picture and an icon that maybe you can make bigger if you tapped on it, but that's not the focal point. The focal point is job, where you live, what you're interested in, hobbies, things like that. I think if you get that information, that's a more likely to be long-lasting relationship than one that's based on physicality. There's a famous saying, "Ava hatluya bedavar," which means love that's based on something.
Mm-hmm.
And if your love is based on physicality, I'm going to scare you all and say we all get old and we all get ugly.
Mm-hmm. It's life.
We do. That's life. And if the only thing that we have is because you're 20 and fit and you go to the gym every day, but when you're 30, you break a leg and now you can't work
Mm-hmm.
out and now you get fat and not as attractive. Why would that relationship survive? It was based on you're 20 and you're fit. There's only so long you could be 20 and fit.
Yeah. No, for sure. On a funny note, there's actually a guy who's, I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's oh, Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. But it's funny that there's actually a guy who I think is on that note anti-aging, but I think he's like one in like the entire world who's trying to do that. So assuming we're not all to that extent,
Yeah, and
definitely.
I don't think you live a happy life if again, I think he's missing the point. We all
Mhm.
age, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But if we have nothing else to live for but our good looks, it's the same thing. Our life has been meaningless. If
Hmm.
if if I died in 30, 40 years and I have grandchildren and great grandchildren and have lived a successful life and lived a moral life, I don't care what I look like when I die. Why
Got
would
it.
I care? Again, I don't want to look decrepit,
Yeah.
but it might happen. I always say because people don't know how old I am, and I can pause for a second and let you guess. But I'm younger than I look. Let's just go with that.
Hmm.
We could talk about my age later, but I always say to friends, I was like, I'm gonna look like this for the next 40 years.
It's not
You're
not
gonna
a
get
bad look.
old. You're gonna
The,
get old.
for sure. I mean, it's
You
not a
know?
bad look, Rabbi. I know loosely kind of what your
I
age
mind
is,
it.
and
I
you
don't
look.
mind it.
No, you look great for your age. So I'll just shamelessly plug that. So no worries on
Love
that
it.
whatsoever. And
I do have a good beard game. I like my beard game. I'm
it
I'm
is
proud of it.
it is an A1 beard game, as I may add. But what a good idea for a dating app if anyone out there is interested in kind of pursuing, that something that's a little more focused. While I think it's fair to kind of see pictures of some people, and I think there's something, if I'm not mistaken, something in halacha regarding you have to have some kind of physical attraction to your significant other, and halacha is
Million
Jewish law
percent.
for those that don't know. But would a good dating app be something where while you can see pictures of someone else, there's more of an emphasis on kind of what someone's background is and really them talking about what they're looking for and in a significant other, and then see if that's compatible with what you're trying to do.
I think that ties into what we started with
Mm-hmm.
about objective opinion. That when we were talking about, Israel and we're talking about sports, is if you see a picture, that automatically skews your direction into one direction,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't give you an actual true understanding of who that person is. And if we want an app that's truthful, and we talked about trying to bring more truth into the world, I think that's a great way to do it. Is are we compatible because we like the same things?
Mm-hmm.
There's a funny Family Guy episode, and yes, I'm quoting Family Guy,
Oh, we love
where
that.
Brian goes to India. Do you ever see that one?
I think so. Yeah. He goes to India because he spoke over the phone
It's
with some.
on the phone, right? Right, and he first calls out her name, and so and so, I can't remember her name. Stand up, like this lady stands up, and she's obviously not the pinnacle of beauty,
Mhm.
and he goes, is that you? And she's like, no, there was a snake under my desk, and she moves over, and then there's the pretty girl,
Yep.
but but that's the point, is that the natural reaction is, like you sounded nice on the phone, but now that I'm seeing you in person, and if you get to know the person, beauty is in a very, very, very subjective thing. Like
Mhm.
it's based on what I like. There's a pot to every, there's a pot covered every pot,
Mhm.
and what I find attractive or what he finds attractive is going to be different.
Mhm.
And we get so caught up in what the world has told us is attractive. the concept of a golden ratio. I laugh at that.
Got it.
I laugh at that. It's great, but for who?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen someone that they say has the 99% golden ratio, and you're like, that is not my style. It's just not.
No, for sure. I definitely think it's something that's very subjective, and I think you can joke around with your friends in a more secular way, but I definitely think that real relationships are based off something, a more commonality or a more common vision for how you want to see your life. And I definitely think that I have can talk about personal topics here, but that would be a whole other conversation. But I definitely think that dating more towards the religious vibe and what. Even that being said, everyone has what they're most comfortable with. But I definitely think that dating towards more the traditional Jewish end focuses more on that, and that's why you see, while every marriage doesn't work out, whatever religion or sect you look at, I think more often than not they work out in Judaism because the foundation is there for something great. So definitely
Correct.
beautiful on there. Quick follow on regarding your story. As you mentioned earlier, I know you said that you lived in Israel for a few years and your first two kids were born there. Just curious, where did you live in Israel and kind of what was that like being a younger couple?
Yeah, I lived in Jerusalem.
Oh, awesome.
I lived in an Anglo area called Malot Daphna,
Mm-hmm.
where a lot of younger couples my age. Now it's actually like morphed into, a lot of those people have stayed. So
Mm-hmm.
it's actually become like they're still my age, I guess, but they're not younger couples, you know. And there was a certain freeingness to it. Like there was a certain like being. I mean, it was also the beginning of my marriage,
Mm-hmm.
so you know, me and my wife learning how to be married and, working through all the different things that, hit a newly married couple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but there was something like freeing of just, this is what I'm doing. I'm living here. I'm on my own. My parents and my in-laws are miles away, and not just miles, but hundreds of miles away,
Mm-hmm.
maybe thousands of miles. I can never remember how far the
Thousands. I think
Atlantic is.
Israel is something like the plane's
You
going
would know this.
500. Yeah, because I've been fortunate enough to fly back a few times. But if, for example, in Israel, if you're flying, I think it's so. One time I actually flew there 9.5 hours, probably one of the faster flights. But if the plane is going, say, 500-600 miles an hour, 10 hours, 5,000-6,000 miles, something like this.
Yeah, it makes sense. I thought it was thousands of miles because Baltimore's 100 miles, so from Philly. So I can't imagine Israel is just, maybe 9 more times than that. That would be very close, and we'd probably be going more often.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was nice to learn how to be ourselves, in our own environment, in our own apartment, without as much.
Exactly.
We definitely had familial support. Like I said, my sister lived there. I had my wife has an aunt and uncle that lived there with a bunch of kids. Later on, the last year, my wife's brother actually moved there also.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just it. Living in Israel is different.
Fair.
And what's funny is that having gone back there to visit, it's such a different world because, like, as a tourist, even if you're not like touristy, you're still a
Mm-hmm.
tourist.
For sure.
And you're going to all the things, and let's say you're there for 7 days, right? You're not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to the Kotel. You're going to the Shuk. You're going to Ein
That's
Gedi,
true.
the Dead Sea. You're doing all the touristy sites, whether you're, like I said, touristy or not. But you're not living real life. And it was like going back there was such an interesting way of looking at it because I remember people always coming and, they always wanted your time when
Mm-hmm.
they visited. And I'm like, I have a life.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if you came to America and said, okay, no work for you for 7 days. You're gonna hang out with me and we're gonna go to the Liberty Bell and we're gonna go to the Mint and we'll go to old whatever,
Hopefully,
the
all that.
South Street, Chinatown. Well, I'll be like, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
maybe I could hang out with you a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna like, so it's interesting seeing the contrast. But living there it was a lot more refreshing than America. We didn't have a car.
Mm-hmm.
We took buses. We didn't even take taxis, really. We walked everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Best shape of my life, probably. Probably that minus like post heart attack. Yeah, I had a heart attack.
No,
Shameless plug.
It's fun.
But
I love,
now,
by the way, I love how you're able to talk about that freely, as we all should with kind of the crazy situations in
oh,
our life. So,
I think it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
hmm
It happened to me young.
hmm
It happened to me. I didn't have like bypass surgery. I just had a stent put in, so
hmm
it was a lot less. All the NCS wires that are going to watch this are going to be like, "What? We didn't hear." But you can all call me for good wishes if you want. But I picked up biking. I had mentioned that to you offline. And it's amazing just being like healthy, like a
Yep.
different world.
No,
I don't know
for
if you
sure.
remember
I
how
think
much candy I used to eat. Do you remember how much candy I
no,
used to eat?
you used to you went to town at the Shabbatones.
I
I'll
used
put
to
it
go
that
to town.
way.
I haven't had a piece of candy in about 4.5 years.
Wow,
So
that's
yeah.
progress. Wow, that's interesting to hear. I had another person on my podcast not too long ago, but this woman by the name of Jennifer Drummond. She was in a car accident when she was I can't forget if she was a little younger, kind of if it was a few years ago, but she said it was one of the best things that happened to her because she just kind of like totally changed her life. So it reminds me a lot of this book that I'm reading, if it sounds familiar, called The Alchemist, where this kid is trying to find his purpose or his journey. And whenever something bad happens, the lesson in it is always to look at it kind of as or something practically bad. The lesson is to look at it as an omen, not just something that, oh, my life sucks. So whenever something bad happens, you're supposed to look at it in the realm or kind of the prism of redirection. And that direction is supposed to take you on a more positive path. So it sounds like you were really able to
Yeah.
see life in a
Fundamentals
more
of
positive
Judaism.
life.
It's the
What's it?
fundamentals of Judaism
Mm-hmm.
that we look at anything that happens for a purpose. And
For
if
sure.
we believe that everything happens for a purpose, whether it's good or bad, then we can make the most out of anything that happens, be it a car accident, a heart attack, or just tripping and breaking a
No.
wrist.
Did you ever think about
But
staying in Israel? Or,
yeah, so we actually thought about staying in Israel when we were leaving,
mm-hmm.
and then 2015, before I moved to Lower Merion,
Mm-hmm.
actually from the Northeast in Philadelphia, we also thought about it because it was a big decision to move.
For sure.
It was changing. We stayed in NCSY, but we changed the direction of what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew it was a big decision, and we looked to potentially going back to Israel. It's hard. It's hard to live in Israel unless you decide to live the lifestyle.
For sure.
You know, be it child raising, be it amount of income, opportunities for income. Remember, whether for better or for worse, I had a bachelor's, but that was the extent of my formal education before
Mm-hmm.
before I went into my next line of work.
Mm-hmm.
But there's not as much marketable income. I wasn't a doctor or lawyer that is transferable to what they would need me for in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So unless I found a position of similar ilk of NCSY or something like that, which again pays less and it's a harder lifestyle. So
For sure.
we didn't make that decision.
Got it. I mean, do you ever think about hypothetically if you did move back, what life would have been like? I know there's a lot of drawbacks, but a lot of like the benefits of living in Israel.
Oh, 1,000,000% all the time. I mean,
Mhm.
first of all, there's yes, there are opportunities for secular world there, but in Israel, it's you have to look for it a little bit more.
Mhm.
Not as much in your face. There are definitely communities that you can live in that are infinitely more sheltered in that sense. That just don't expose your children. And back to our question of raising children, in today's generation, it definitely would have been different raising our children there. We would have probably had very different. I have an aunt that one of her favorite lines is she says, you know, if I had a chance to raise my children again, I would do everything completely different and make a whole new set of mistakes.
I
You
think
know,
I think it's a beautiful note because a lot of people think about, oh, if I did this or that, my life would have been better. I think the more objective way to look at it, even though it's a really emotional topic, is it would have been different. You can't say if it would have been better or worse. It would have been something else, and you would have been just as excited for that
correct,
journey. But for whatever reason, this is kind of where life took you.
1,000,000%.
For sure. On that
Mhm.
note, you still ended up, as you mentioned, you ended up staying kind of within the Philadelphia area, kind of moved to Lower Merion and have built yourself a bit of a life there. And even back when you were involved in NCSY, you did a lot of stuff. You kind of really grew the community there and you were closer to some of the more religious schools. So just easier of access to that sort of demographic that you were trying to deal
Mhm.
with. Do you remember any of your favorite NCSY memories? Ones that are appropriate to share over the camera,
PG.
where you weren't, or we didn't have any issues with me or my
Are
friends.
you
As a
paused
shameless plug
again?
there, but
I don't know if
any
you can
fun
hear
memories
me.
you
I
want to
feel like you can
mention?
hear me, but I can't hear you.
Oh, can
Can you
you?
hear me? Yep,
Yep, I
I'm
can
back.
hear you.
Okay,
My bad.
perfect. All good. Favorite NCSY memories. There are so many. Um, One of my favorite will always be. I don't know if I think you were around already at this time, or you were like almost around when we made that the waving flag video with Rob Harburger.
With Rob.
Were
Sound.
you around? You can Google it. It's called Philadelphia Freedom Fighters, and it has
Mhm.
nothing to do with what we probably thought the name wasn't. Uh,
Yep.
we were not trying to like secede from America.
Mhm.
Um, but we did like the waving flag video, and it was all about freedom, and it was about Israel and the freedom in Israel and stuff like that. And it was just a blast. And then we did like the Mighty Ducks,
Mhm.
the when they collect everybody.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm definitely dating myself because the Mighty Ducks is so long ago.
It's all good.
But they go from person to person, and each one, the group gets bigger. And it was just showing the idea of who we are and what the opportunities we have are to affect change, and be free, to be religious and be Jewish. That was definitely one of them. Um, there are so many, like I I, I sit back and I you know
Reminisce.
will reminisce all the time, and
Mhm.
each person I talk to will conjure up a different memory. And each time I sit down, it's like, oh, this is my favorite. So I don't know if
Mhm.
I have favorites, but I have memories that come up, like when I had a hernia in Israel, and
Mhm.
our Malave Neshek, our Chovesh, pushed me up the hill with one of my daughters on his shoulders,
Mhm.
and two kids on my lap on the on
Mhm.
the on the wheelchair, and he pushed me up a hill. That was those are memories.
Got it.
Um, and then just all the good times, the latte and learnings, the hanging out, the inspiration. Um, your graduation was a good one.
Got
I
it.
won't
I
mention
oh
any. I won't.
I
I
did
won't mention any. I won't mention anybody's names. I don't
I
want to
did
get anybody
graduate high
insulted.
school. I forgot about that. Yeah, that is that's
Yeah.
something that I ended up doing.
But your NCSY graduation also. Like it's. I guess they're they're my like most enjoyable memories, and then they're the most inspiring memories. And I think that
Mhm.
that's probably a better question. Was every year when we graduated teens, and we knew that they were going off to a place to be different and to
Mhm.
grow and to take what we taught them and move forward with it. I think that that's that was always what kept me going. Was 3 years later, or even now, like when we touched base, people reaching out to each other. I think I sent you a picture. I think that
Yep.
that's what it was. But those things come up all the time. And if we reached out to everybody that we thought about when we thought about them, we'd be infinitely closer to a lot more people. I think we balk at it. We're like, oh, they probably don't care, and I've definitely done that. I think about it, but like I've definitely done that. That was a great picture.
Yep.
um
For sure.
and and it's being reached out to later on in life. I have a this is a good story. I have a study partner that I learn with. I
Mhm.
study Monday nights and Tuesday nights in the local kollel,
Mhm.
where they learn. And one night I'm sitting there, and as I'm finishing up with the guy that I'm learning with, he has somebody else that he's going to learn with.
Interesting.
And in walks in one of my previous JSU presidents in Harridan High School.
Interesting.
He walked in, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is
The
like
person.
like he's grown, and now he's now not only is he studying and growing, but he's learning with the same guy that I'm learning with.
Mhm.
He came to learn with my guy after me. So we learned back to back. And I'm like, this is like, that's nachas, you know,
Mhm.
seeing them, grow, and seeing them, run podcasts, and seeing them become members of society. No, it's true. I can't point to them because I don't know who they are. The people that don't become people
Mhm.
that I interact with later on in life,
Mhm.
because they're I tried to do this once. I was not successful. It's also very hard once you hire other people.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen thousands of teens over
Mm-hmm.
my time.
Yep.
Probably 4,000 teens
Mm-hmm.
when I think about it.
Okay.
Now, some were one-offs.
Mm-hmm.
Some they came to one JSU or one Lantian learning, and I never saw them again. Some I saw once a year, but many of them I saw quite often. And some of them stayed in touch. Some of them I made a bigger impact, and some of them I made a great impact on, but they didn't necessarily, let me know about it,
Mm-hmm.
and that's fine. Also, it was about knowing that I planted seeds and gave people an opportunity to grow and become, upstanding members of society in the Jewish world, in Israeli politics and things like that. And that was my goal.
It's beautiful to
So
hear and awesome that you were able to touch that many lives. But when you were thinking about leaving, was it really bittersweet knowing that that was
oh,
kind of another
so bitter,
lifetime, another kind
so
of not
bittersweet.
lifetime life leaving behind?
So we did like a small. It wasn't so big, um, like a goodbye, gathering, and they printed out pictures from
Mm-hmm.
the 13 years. They went to my Facebook and other people's Facebook and found pictures of me with people. I still
Mm-hmm.
have all the pictures, and they put them on like little stands, and they were everywhere around where we had this gathering, and it was like so emotional. And then like we spoke, and I spoke, and people spoke about me, and one of the NCS wires spoke about me,
Mm-hmm.
from local, and like it was just so inspiring to
Mm-hmm.
see that I made a difference. Um, but it was super bittersweet. I was very nervous about leaving because I knew that there were teens that were still in high school, and then I also knew that there were teens that some of them, knew me from the community that were looking forward to having me,
Mm-hmm.
and interacting with me, and never got that chance.
Mm-hmm.
So I try. I'm still connected to the community. I still try to help out at the Purim events and the Hanukkah events, and whenever they're having teen stuff, I try to get involved as best as I can.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to move on as well, gracefully, hopefully,
Yep.
and go to the next stage of your life, but never stop giving. It was one of our commitments that when we stop doing NCSY, our home is still open. People
Mm-hmm.
still call us all the time for advice.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't get paid for what I do now.
Yep. Well, that's a
Maybe have a little
beautiful
bit more time.
no, for sure. It's a really beautiful note, and obviously bittersweet, but everyone moves on for whatever they have to do, and that's just life. But it's great that you're able to kind of stay in a community. As a quick follow into that, so what has the next phase of your life been after NCSY, or after you're still doing stuff with NCSY, but what do you do now with most of the time you have?
So I am now doing real estate development and construction. I don't know if that's the correct term for it.
Mm-hmm.
I manage construction of rehabs of properties and ground up buildings,
Mm-hmm.
usually like duplexes and triplexes around the Philadelphia area, north, south, west, and anywhere in between. And then I also run the management of the rental piece of it or the sale of it. So if
Mm-hmm.
we're selling a property or we're renting it, I'm also involved in making sure that the tenants get in, they pay their rent,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then getting them refied after the construction. So really, soup to nuts. It's a small company, so
Mm-hmm.
it's just me, and my boss, and we do that. But what's fascinating is my interaction with all these people that I interact with, the workers and the tenants and all that, and I see myself still doing the same thing. I'm the same guy. I just went to a place today. My sister's visiting, and we went out, and she looked at me after. She's like, you just have a good time with these people, and that's what it is. It's about being positive, and it's about enjoying life, and making other people happy, no matter what you do, and no matter where you are, no matter what your job is,
you know
is interacting with people.
what's beautiful on that note, I thought of a funny joke just now. It's almost like NCSY was the best business school you could go to for what you're
A
doing
million
right
percent,
now.
a million percent. By the way, I say it all the time. I went into this job. There was no previous, like, people are like, did you do real estate before? Did you construction? I said no,
Mm-hmm.
but I did management, and I took care of who knows how many teams on a
Mm-hmm.
regular basis. you know, I
So
made sure that they did the things that they were supposed to do,
mm-hmm.
and took care of the things that they were supposed to do. You had a chapter board, and they needed to get an event put together.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did. I project managed,
Mm-hmm.
and I project managed all the time. It was definitely. I think you said it as a joke, but I think it's 100% true. It was the best business school ever.
No, for sure. What has the learning curve
Now
been
I'm
like?
dealing with adults.
No, for sure. I mean,
Um,
everyone has their own dynamics, but definitely, definitely still the same kind of vibe. But what has the learning curve been like in kind of a more oriented business industry?
so it's if you're intuitive,
Hmm.
I think that the learning curve is not so hard.
Got it.
Like if you're handy, then you can pick up on these things. Like I've made mistakes of like not reading the plans correctly, and now I know
Hmm.
how to read plans.
Hmm.
I've been doing this for less than a year and a half, and I can read a full set of plans and tell you what type of sheetrock you need to use and how much insulation you need in a building. If it's if it's a row home or if it's a single standing, you know what are all the things you need for a final inspection that an inspector is going to look at and go, you didn't do that.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's a screw. I didn't put that screw in. He's like,
Hmm.
yep, that's it. You didn't do it. And things like that. And um, if you're intuitive and you have a good eye for detail, it's a decent learning curve.
Hmm.
I like I said, I definitely made mistakes when I started,
As we
but
all
I
do.
think that yeah, but I think that I'm worlds away.
Hmm.
I can navigate the Philadelphia License and Inspections Bureau pretty well.
Hmm.
Hopefully they're not going to listen to this and yell at me. Um,
Oh, good.
but it was a fun learning experience. But
Got
I
it.
think that depends on your boss. My boss was fun and enjoyable and let me make mistakes.
No,
So
that's awesome. Mistakes are the best things to rebound off of. So definitely no shame in that. But do you think that the big thing, this could be a bigger metaphor for society? We place a lot of emphasis on more hard skills when realistically a lot of stuff is intuition. So if we can get some kind of experience where we have to grow our intuition, if that makes sense, then everything else will kind of fall into place. Does that really make sense?
$1,000,000%. I'm gonna say something that, if I was live and in front of people, I don't know if I would get away with saying it as much, but like I would be skewered. I think college is often a waste of time.
I agree. As a 4-year college grad who was fortunate enough to
Right.
grow
I
up,
like,
I agree with you.
especially for a bachelor's degree, I feel like we have the opportunity to educate people about how to interact with people and how, like, yeah, there might be a class on management,
Hmm.
but probably not. Like we spend so much time on English and on history and on science, and we're like, I'm going to be an engineer. Teach me engineering stuff.
Hmm.
Like that's my goal. My goal is to be an engineer. So I need 4 years of I don't know what, and then another 4 years of like maybe a little bit more focused. Like, why don't we condense that? Let people pick up the skills, move on with their lives. I don't know if it's society thinks that people aren't mature enough,
Hmm.
and they need to be like 22, 21, 22 in order to be able to
Quote
really
unquote.
get a skill.
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe that's what it is. I was married at 21.
Hmm.
So
No,
if I could get married at 21, I'm pretty sure I can get a degree by 21.
for sure.
Um, so that's my hot take, by the way.
Not even no. I mean, it's a hot take, but one that I share with you with. I think I've had a lot of conversations with friends recently in the sense that I think college, for worse, in my not so humble opinion, has become more business oriented. And while I know money is currency and we all have to put food on the table, I think the issue is now it's just become less condensed, or I don't even know if it was ever super condensed, but essentially in the sense that there's a lot of general education credits that people have to take when realistically looking back at my degree, I mean all the mandatory classes I had to take I could have probably done in 2 years. Like
Right.
my humble opinion on the area is that there should be more of a standard where undergrad, your kind of bachelor's degree is more of 2 years, and then for people that want to study more advanced degrees, then they can pursue additional schooling. But 4 years for undergrad just seems like such a money grab these days, you know?
That's often what Israel does. Israel actually starts you in the career path. I think there's a name for it. I can't remember. It's slipping my mind. But you take something Bagrut maybe. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's called your Bagrut. That you take them in like 10th or 11th grade,
Mm-hmm.
and that's your career path. Like that's where you start already in high school learning the things that you need. Like if you're not going to become an English major, I'm not saying you don't need an English like education and how to write and whatever, because we all write emails, we all
Mm-hmm.
write, we'll have to write a blurb or something. But like we don't need to know how to write a 30-page essay.
For
Like we
sure.
just don't. And we get the people where they are, but I don't know if people are in a rush to start life. So maybe that's what it is. Like in hindsight we are, Hindsight, we would love to have started life, but the question is, did we want to start life when we had the opportunity to? And I don't
Definitely.
know.
I think that the big thing is that school has an issue these days where there's an issue with school that they don't really teach you the skills you need to add value to society. And also, in my not so humble opinion, I think most people, well, yeah, ideally most people, I can't speak for every career path, but typically you're compensated kind of in equivalence or in commensurate with the value that you add to society. And the issue is that kind of that platform or that objective of adding value isn't always something that's perfectly correlated with your education. So sometimes you could have someone with great grades, but they got great grades in areas that weren't kind of life functions or areas where you could add value. So oftentimes, just because someone does well, it doesn't necessarily reflect on their earning potential. I know kind of money isn't everything, but just if college is supposed to gear you towards a career, then I think a big issue right now is it doesn't teach you how to add value to society, which I think should be the main point. But now that I think of it, it would make too much sense to do that. So why would they do that in the first place?
I mean, to piggyback on what you're saying, like doctors and lawyers are important,
For sure.
but are they more important than the person that built your house or that made sure that the bridge doesn't fall down?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so.
Sure.
We put a value onto things. Like you have doctors that like do plastic surgery and they make billions of dollars, but like, are they adding to society?
Is that a necessary need? And is it based off something that people
No,
need versus what
and
they think they need?
and not necessarily is it a necessary need, but is it a bigger need than so many of the things that we have? Now, I'm not saying that someone who stocks groceries on a shelf should make the same as a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
but we need people to stock shelves.
For sure.
So, like, oh, you get minimum wage
Mm-hmm.
because you're not a doctor, maybe, or we all sort of make this. Again, we don't live in a world like this. We're talking fantasy here,
Yep.
but like, I don't know, maybe the pay gap should be smaller,
Mm-hmm.
and like, but again, you have to pay billions of dollars to go to medical school. That's the only reason why they get paid that much,
For
so that
sure.
they can pay back their student loans.
Definitely. I think it's a tough dynamic for sure. But I think, when you have stuff with like lawyers, doctors, something that requires a more extensive education, I think that makes sense because I think in a way, assuming they're doing it in a positive faith way and they're working on, no one's going to agree on the definition of practical, but practical issues, then
Right.
I think it's fair to be compensated in such a way. But if you're making money off something I think that society doesn't need, but something that it values in a superficial way, then that's something I think we all got to look at ourselves in the mirror and try to fix for sure.
1,000,000%.
Definitely. So hopefully, that dynamic will be better moving forward. But I don't have
When we run the world, that's what's going to happen. So
for sure.
it's good.
Yeah. I don't have a crystal ball. I mean, if I did have a crystal ball, I would invest in all the companies that I know are going to be like 10x in a few years on the stock market. But other than that, I would try to kind of make society a little better. So definitely makes sense there. But another thing that I wanted to get into, and we're seeing a lot of this unfortunately now, especially with what's going on in Israel. But why do you think there's been such a big rise in anti-Semitism recently?
So there's the religious answer, and then there's the practical answer, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
The religious answer is that, as God sees that we are not necessarily as proud of our Judaism or connecting to our Judaism,
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to hide our Judaism. And I'm going to say this with all deference. That's what happened in the Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of it was people were like, I'm not Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
The Nazis are like, yes, you are. They did research that people didn't do themselves.
Interesting.
They're like, you have like a great grandmother that's Jewish. You're Jewish. They were telling people that they were Jewish, and people are like, I haven't been Jewish in like 4 generations, and they're
Mm-hmm.
like, sorry, buddy, but your family tree says you are.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that God wants us to remember, it's a little bit of rebuke.
Mm-hmm.
It's always hard to swallow because people are suffering, and we don't want people to suffer, and we don't want them to be suffering with no reason.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have a religious reason, the answer is I don't know. There's no is there a reason why when the hospital blows up everybody says it was Israel?
They hate us because they ain't us, something like that.
They hate us because they ain't us.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that? I don't even know what that's from.
It's
But
from a funny movie, but similar point.
But it's funny because I know exactly what you're saying, and I have the scene in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I never knew what it was from.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what it is. It's like it's very hard. because we can't. First of all, we can't say for sure. We don't know
Mhm.
what's going on. Like, I would love to pin one of them down and go like, but why? Like, why do you actually hate me?
Mhm.
Oh, we don't hate you. You do. So you'll never get a real answer. And I think that that's where we struggle, is like, if you took each individual and said, why are you an anti-Semite? They'll either make up a mishigas about the fact that you control the world.
Huh.
I'm like, but why me? I don't control the world. Do I look like I have enough money to control the world? Do I
Mhm.
look like I'm living in luxury? Like,
Mhm.
so why do you hate me? You want to hate that guy?
Hate that guy.
I don't want to tell you not to hate that
Mhm.
guy, to hate that guy, but like, hate that guy. But
Mhm.
like, why me? So you'll never get a real answer. And that's why I like to fall back on the religious answer, because I think it's important. And it doesn't have to be as extreme as I said it. It just has to be like, it's always a reminder that we're Jewish. And if
Mhm.
we value what Judaism is, then that's what it's going to be.
Yep.
Um,
For,
it's a tough pill to swallow, because it just means that we don't know. And no one likes to not know.
for sure. I think the tough part is too, a lot of times in life you can't rationalize practical situations or practical indifferences. And I think maybe looking at it from the religious perspective and the practical perspective, I mean, practically it sucks. It's unfortunate to see so many of our brothers, sisters, loved ones, slaughtered, in cold blood and just hard, horrific circumstances. But on the other end, you're saying that historically stuff has happened like this when around the world, people haven't been as Jews haven't been as prideful or kind of proud about their Judaism. So, while it sucks practically, is there something written in the Torah in the sense that whenever people are ashamed to be Jews or people are hiding their Judaism, that unfortunately we're subject to events like this.
So yeah, there are a couple spots in the Torah that it actually says that. It says, when you don't follow my laws and you don't
Mhm.
go in my ways, um, there's gonna be trouble, and you're
Mhm.
gonna suffer. You're gonna get kicked out of Israel.
Mhm.
We look at the destruction of the two temples. That's what happened.
Mhm.
We're in Israel, but we're not 100% in Israel. We're still fighting to be in Israel. When they were in Israel, when we need to make sure that we're there because we're supposed to be there,
Mhm.
and that we want to be there, and that God wants us to be there. And we're not 100% there yet.
Mhm.
And I think it's the same thing. It's just, when we don't follow, the laws, and we don't go in the way of Judaism, there are definitely, punishments that come from it.
It's unfortunate, and I hope we can win this war smoothly, and all the hostages will be returned, and over time
Amen.
people will get more prideful about their Judaism, and even those who aren't Jewish can respectfully be a little more educated regarding who the good guys are here. But that's another note. But on a final note, there, what do you think, or what can we Jews do right now at a time like this to really help out or really be more prideful about our Judaism?
I think it's about a little bit putting aside the things that make us different as Jews, because
Mhm.
if you look at Jews, we're probably the most diverse culturally,
For sure.
like such a small group of people that are so different from each
Mhm.
other. And we saw something similar in the world for sure with COVID, but now, it's about togetherness. It's
Mhm.
about caring for each other. It's about, hearing that something happened. Forget about like in Israel alone, but everywhere is helpful, thinking about others. Someone is in need, praying for them. Someone's sick, being sad and praying for them. Someone needs help, grocery shopping, going out and helping. It's the more together we are,
Mhm.
and I can make it political for a half a second.
Go do your
You look
thing.
at, I don't think it's true as much as it was when it first started, which is always the issue, is that we go like this, and then we gradually drift back apart. Um, but I think for the first time in modern Israeli history, everybody was on the same side. They put aside all their differences
Mhm.
politically and made a coalition. And it's never happened
Mhm.
in the history of Israel. And that's something that we should have, clung to. And then, again, we see very clearly the cracks in the veneer of what Israeli politics look like still.
Yeah.
Not again, but still. It was a nice show at the beginning of a front of unity, and I think they're still benefiting from some of that unity, but they're definitely no longer in that. This is who we are. We're one.
No,
And I think that I think that's what we need to do is achdus, and togetherness and oneness, and being as connected as we can to each other and all Jews.
For sure. I think a beautiful note and beautiful advice there. On another end, do you think also, a lot of people don't really understand the power of tzedakah or charity. Do you think that's also something people could do right now to really feel more connected to their Judaism?
Yeah, so we say it in the Yom Kippur services and Rosh Hashanah services,
Mhm.
tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah.
Mhm.
We actually just now hit all three, right?
Wow.
We pray to God, repent, be more religious in some sense, even just prideful for your Judaism and connected to your Judaism and not trying to hide your Judaism. And tzedakah,
Mhm.
it goes back to the caring for others. It's when we give from ours to somebody else, then we're saying that what I have is also yours. And if you need it,
Mhm.
I can help you with it. And it doesn't have
Mhm.
to be just the poor. It could be people that, in Israel they need, supplies, or, there's an organization that helps, kids who are sick. All those different things are going to be different opportunities to give. And you need to find one that resonates with you. I don't think that people should just wantonly give tzedakah.
Mhm.
I think you have to feel it,
Got it.
because then you're actually giving. When an envelope comes in the mail and you're like, it's not really meaningful.
Mhm.
But if you give it to something and you know that it's going to that, and you could feel prideful about it,
Mhm.
go, I've given to that. I've helped that organization, those soldiers, that poor family that lives in my community. That's, it creates a feeling of, I want to do it again, and I want to do more of it.
For sure. I think a lot of times, people don't place enough emphasis. I know we've been talking a lot about tangible things and, that sort of stuff, but a lot of times when you do something intangible, but it's intangibly like you do, or not that, if you do something, this is how I should frame it. If you do something tangible, but then you get that intangible feeling that comes along with it, if you actually give it thought, it's one thing to just kind of give charity and then being like, okay, whatever, I know where it's going towards a good cause. Or when you give charity and you see the impact, it's tough to describe
Right.
besides an intangible feeling. It makes you understand that, while there are certain ways or there are certain things we have to do, like make money or, feed a family and do all those things,
Yeah.
we also realize how much of a beautiful, thing this is. And we think of it more as an obligation to do. And it's a really beautiful thing in general. And quick final note on there, I think there's actually a line in the Torah, I don't know it perfectly, so sorry for misquoting, but something like, for everything that we give, we get 10x back. So it's almost like if we
Right.
give and we don't have to worry about, or kind of, we don't think of like, oh, I'm losing this, losing that. If we give within practical means, which is, a thing in its own, but if we give kind of what we can, not worry about it, we can just be confident that in one way, shape,
Correct.
or form, we'll get it back. So beautiful in there.
Asher Shetisha Asher. Give a 10, so you'll become rich.
For sure.
That's what
And
it is.
beautiful line there, and great dialogue around that. I have a few other fun questions to get into, which I think you'll
Go
like
for it.
answering. You ready
Yeah,
for these? So
I'm ready.
right now you have 6 kids, perfectly down the line with genders, 3 boys, 3 girls. I think that's something a lot of families would love to have. You thinking about having any more, or yeah, 6 is enough for
uh,
you?
I'm gonna go off the record and say we are not, but you never
Mhm.
know.
That's a fair answer there. I like the small cliffhanger there. I mean, six
If my
is
wife ever watches this is what I'm gonna have to say, so I might as well say it.
no worries. I mean, six is a ton. I don't think I'll
6 is
I don't,
it's a nice number,
I don't think I'll have
100%.
6 kids when I'm older, but I guess we'll see whatever path that God lets you guys walk
I'm
in
gonna laugh
the
when you
future.
do, so it's okay.
Yep, for sure. We'll remember this. But on another note, you worked at NCSY and now you're working in kind of this real estate and construction role and have been able to kind of grow a lot in your role there. If after NCSY you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing?
So I feel like I answered that. I probably would end up being like a social worker.
Hmm.
It was something that very much was the other direction I was going to go if I wasn't offered this job.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's probably where I would be.
Got it. Do you know what kind of social work you'd be doing?
Probably teens,
Got it. Okay.
and probably it's like probably very similar. Like you almost wouldn't be able to tell the difference. That's probably what would have ended up happening. Would have been funny.
Yep.
Like I would have left one job and gone right into the same job somewhere
Uh,
else.
Transferable skills, so we'll leave it at that.
Exactly. Hey, who
On,
needs college?
for sure. Exactly. Yeah. On another note, you say kind of after that big event that happened in your life, you picked up a few new hobbies. So which of those is your favorite?
So my favorite is biking,
Hmm.
100%. I don't know if I mentioned that that I started biking, but I think I mentioned it very quickly. It actually ties into a shameless plug for I do something called Bike for Chai, which is it's a 2-day ride. We bike about 160 miles over 2 days.
Wow.
And we raise funds for this organization called Chai Lifeline, which is an organization that helps kids with all disabilities and stuff like that, cancer and whatnot. And one of the things that they do is at the very end of the ride, we bike into. They have a camp that they run in the summer. It's called Camp Simcha. We actually bike into camp, and it's probably one of the most, like you talked about, an intangible feeling, because you can only walk away with it. I didn't walk away with anything like solid, but I walked away with this intangible feeling of like, this is who I'm helping. These kids that some can't afford it, some the medical bills are astronomical, and you bike into camp, and it's such a euphoric feel. It like music and dancing. It's probably one of the most amazing feelings I've had. So that is coupled with my want for biking. I love it. I don't know if you could see, my bike is in the background.
Yep,
This
I
is
see the blue bike.
that's my stationary bike. It's
Got it.
connected to Zwift. You try to bike even in the winter when it's cold outside. Also very heart healthy. It's good cardio.
No, for sure.
That's definitely a hobby. I started running a little bit more also. I never used to run. I bake. People would not know that. I baked French macarons. Actually, I have some really good pictures of them. I'll have to send them your way.
I
But
appreciate that. Interesting.
yeah, a lot of it came out of like COVID. COVID brought out a lot of free time and gave me an ability. I actually just started a new hobby, writing, Safras, the writing of the Torah, the letters. That's actually something that I picked up. I just started about a month ago.
Got it. Interesting.
So we'll see.
I guess we all have our hidden hobbies and talents.
For sure.
I run, I think, twice a week. So yesterday was my second cardio day. Actually, just on a personal note. So maybe I'll have to come down to LM one time in warmer weather, and we can do a run together.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and then afterward, for sure. And then afterward, get some nice kosher pizza and feel a little less guilty about ourselves.
Either that, or we'd go to Judah's. I'm pretty sure that's the only place we're allowed to eat.
That too, yeah. We'll figure it out. But interesting note on there. Another follow-up kind of regarding your life and a lot of the things that you've been up to and what you're doing now. Reflecting back, is there something that you wish you knew when you were younger that you think would really help you out today?
Ooh.
Other than stock tips, ideally.
Yeah, like I think that was where I was going. It was like how to make more money quickly. That life. It's not something that I wish I knew. It's something that I'm happy that I have now. I guess it's a little bit different. But like that life, like I guess I'm talking to young. Life is rewarding, and the things that you do in your life are rewarding, and don't take the life that you have for granted. I think that's like. I think I don't know if I would have enjoyed the beginning of my life better if I would have known that, but I think I would have. That like we talked about hardships and things that happen and coming through our lives and change us. Like I wish I had all that knowledge, like the knowledge that I have now. Then, like I wish I would have started life, which again makes what we do moot because our whole goal in life is to become better, and to grow as people. If I had all that knowledge then, what would I be doing now? I would have a whole new mess of knowledge that I wish I would have known, and would have been a vicious cycle.
Yep, for sure. So more wholesome knowledge, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Got it. Fair note.
Besides stock tips, stock tips are given.
Yeah, stock tips for sure. I would have invested in Google and there's this seed around or Facebook.
Exactly.
So interesting note on there. Another fun note. Do you have a dream dinner guest?
A dream dinner guest. I don't know. I'm like trying to think. Like you know what it is? I think I've had so many different people in my house. Like it's exciting. All those people. Like, would it be cool if like somebody else showed up? Probably. But because I've had such a unique swath of people that have sat at my table, teens, adults, family, I don't know if anybody would come to mind. Like, yeah, we've all loved, like, we'd all love for like, Elon Musk to come to our house because that means we're friends with him.
Yep.
So that means we'd have his money, like, I don't think it would be very not altruistic, like anybody that I want to have is because that means we're friends. And if we're friends, that means like, I get to go to his beach house.
Yep.
But no, you were enough.
Yeah, Fair enough.
You were my ideal dinner guest. How
I
about that?
feel that. Maybe I'll have to come by for Shabbat now that you mentioned
See,
that.
now you feel guilty.
Yeah,
See,
no,
it works.
yeah. That's how you know you're a good social worker when you can guilt people into action to making them do something. That's
There you
a really
go.
good skill. But it sounds like you've been able to have the impact that you've wanted to, and kind of the only other dinner guest you would have would be for for better kind of less altruistic reasons, more because you feel like
Yeah.
you've had dinner and had the impact that as much as you could basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's a fair note there.
Yeah.
What would you say brings you the most happiness in life?
My children.
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's very cop-outy answer, but it really is.
People give a very familial answer typically, so no worries on that. But I think
Yeah, it has to be. It has to be. Even when I who said this line? My wife quotes this all the time, but we say it all the time, is that grandchildren are God's rewards for not killing your own.
I think
So
it's a funny line there.
that's what it is our children are probably our biggest angst
Mm-hmm.
and our biggest like joy in life.
Got it.
And they play that role all the time. You love them and you hate them at the same time.
Yeah, it's an interesting challenge. Probably tougher than any corporate job we can have. It's a pleasure I haven't experienced
1,000,000%.
yet, and a pleasure that I don't.
Also a lot more at stake.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, something that I haven't experienced yet, but something I plan on experiencing in the relatively medium term. We'll put it that way to kind of frame that. But it's okay because a lot of people give
I
that
know a
answer.
dating app that you could look at.
Yeah, well, we'll talk we'll talk about that off air for sure. But basically, it's something that a lot of guests, or a question that I've started asking recently, or not even recently, but a question I've been framing kind of differently a little recently. A lot of people get that answer because I think the beautiful thing it shows is that while it's nice to have great things and it's nice to have great means, a lot of times we're more like we appreciate more the people around us. So I think at the end of the day,
Correct.
it tries to get people more toward value their relationships. And when we all have our differences and stuff happens, we should do our best to enjoy what we can because you never really know what life will bring. So beautiful that you get the joy out of there. And on a parting note, Rabbi, you've done a lot of really cool work and have built up this great kind of young Jewish community and are still kind of involved in it. Yet you've moved on to kind of something else in your life and are, leaving a lasting impact there. Even though you just started, I'm confident, you're going to grow and your impact will definitely be very positive and help a lot of people out. But at the end of your life, at the end of it all, what do you want to be remembered for?
Ah, that I helped people and that people grew from their relationship with me. That the relationships I had with people wasn't for nothing,
Mm-hmm.
and that there are better people in the world because
Mm-hmm.
of me. That's
That's
what I
it.
would say.
It's a beautiful parting note, Rabbi, and it has been an absolute pleasure. I can't believe we've already chatted for an hour and a half. It's been awesome.
Yeah, this is
Really,
great.
really appreciate you taking the time, Rabbi. And
We should not talk for 6 years again. That way we can.
yeah, you can be on episode number 600 at that point. But Rabbi, it's been an absolute blast, and really appreciate you taking the time to go on the show.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Rabbi Yitz Levi. If you enjoyed the episode, rate the show on Spotify, drop a comment on YouTube, and subscribe.